So I would like to acknowledge that we live, work, meet, and travel on the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples that have cared for this land now called Canada since time immemorial. I actually grew up on Bruce County, south of the Saugeen First Nation. And when I was growing up, it was actually an unspoken reality in my family in terms of acknowledging the oppression, the lack of economic support for the First Nation there, where right along the main highway, there was lots of dilapidated housing, that shacks basically, when I grew up there. And my family, we never spoke about it once in terms of the lack of support for our First Nations communities. And that's really provided a grounding on who I am now and where I want to go in the future in terms of trying to acknowledge and address some of these things that I was growing up as a white settler, not recognizing the systemic oppression and disempowerment of our Indigenous peoples. So a land acknowledgement is really only the first step. There's much more work to come, but I would like to acknowledge that here in Toronto, where I live now, I'm grateful to live and work on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, as well as the Haudenosaunee and Mississaugas of the Credit, which is part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. Between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Allied nations, the people peaceably share the Great Lakes and the resources around in this community. So today is about spreadsheets. And I see a question, if you don't have Excel, the vast majority of what I'm going to be sharing you can do in Google Sheets. For those that don't know me, my name is Jessa Aguilo, and I'm founder of ArtsPond Étendard. I'd like to acknowledge the support of Canada Council for the Arts and Government of Canada for our work in the digital sphere, as well as in other territories in terms of programming. If you're not familiar with us, we see ourselves as a change maker, trying to boost healthy human ecosystems, both in real communities on the ground and in virtual communities in the cloud. We have many projects from I Lost My Gig Canada and Ground Story, Arts United, Digital ASO, and you can find me personally at Aguilo Arts on social media. At ArtsPond, we see ourselves broadly as trying to empower and realize equity justice for underserved communities in arts and culture through 4 primary lenses, looking at justice issues around spatial precarity, social exclusion and disempowerment, economic precarity, economic polarization, and looking at digital transformation and digital justice. So today the agenda for today is to do a quick walkabout about where are you at in terms of your comfort at using spreadsheets and other digital tools for managing people and money. And then we'll do a hands-on. I'd like to teach you about various functions, formulas, and tools that are available I'm going to be demonstrating on Excel, so not everything I'm going to show you is available in Google Sheets, but the vast majority are. How to use spreadsheets a little bit better to manage money and manage your time and manage people and manage insights and learnings. And then if enough of you want to learn, don't know about practices around bookkeeping and using Quickbooks or Wave or other kinds of software to manage accounting, then we can talk about some basics around bookkeeping principles and accounting principles and how to use, specifically how to use Quickbooks. But if there isn't enough interest in that, then we can spend the whole 3 hours just looking at Excel and some of the back office tools, so you can become an expert using spreadsheets. So I would actually love to hear from where you all are at in terms of how do you use spreadsheets? And if so, how are you using spreadsheets for managing money, for managing people, for learning about using graphs and various tools that Excel uses to analyze data? Or spreadsheets to analyze data? Are you using spreadsheets to learn and discover insights? If you have a moment in chat, or if you want to put your hand up and share a little bit of a story audibly, How are you using spreadsheets? Do you have challenges? If you're not using spreadsheets, why aren't you? What are some of your experiences around using spreadsheets? So I can have a sense of where you're all at in terms of who's in the room. It's got some people using Google Sheets for database purposes, less for money. Great, glad to hear the word database, because yes, you can use spreadsheets for managing complex information that's often in a database. Using Excel for setting up budgets and track of expenditures. Yes, that is the normal usage for spreadsheets, but did you know you can use spreadsheets for much, much more? Mostly for simple budgeting and tracking sales and expenses. Yep, and to recruit volunteers. Okay, I'd actually like to know how you use spreadsheets to recruit. If it's a public-facing document or an internal, or are you just tracking your recruitment of your HR? That's a little bit more common, but if you're using a Google Sheet to actually recruit and flowcharting can definitely do that. So excellent. Sounds like there's a diversity of perspectives, but for those that are at a more basic level and want to know how to become a bit better of a power user, not only just for money, but for people, I think you'll have some fun time. Some of it you're going to you need to practice it. So I'd like you to follow along if you can, or watch the recordings afterwards. And when I share a form, because we're going to build some formulas and use some functions in those formula building that you perhaps have never used before. So requires a little bit of practice. So you may need to search some of these things that I'm saying again in terms of learning tools. If you don't quite get it and if I go over it too quickly, if you don't quite get it, do say, Jessa, can you please explain again? And I'll explain it twice. And if you don't get it after the second time, then you may need to go find some extra supportive service, a training online. Microsoft Around Excel has tons and tons of videos and examples for every formula or function or feature that I'm going to be sharing with you in terms of using Excel. So there is other resources out there, but if you need a little bit more support from me, I will try. A second time. I'm not sure I have time to do three times, but I'll do my best. So feel free in chat or to just put your hand up or let Victoria know that you have a question and she'll let me know. And I'll try to address those questions as we go along. Okay, so how many, can I just do a quick survey? How many people want to learn a little bit about bookkeeping, accounting, and using QuickBooks specifically? Are people interested in that? Or should we just stay in Excel and in spreadsheets? Yes, maybe perhaps answer in chat. Yes, you want to know about accounting and QuickBooks, or just say Excel, please. Spreadsheets. Someone would like to learn but doesn't have QuickBooks. Okay, yeah, it's helpful to learn the software and also have it so you can use it. You can buy it at a very reduced rate through TechSoup Canada if you're a not-for-profit. Have some people using Wave. Yeah, it's very good software solution for entrepreneurs and sole proprietorships and freelancers. Always happy to learn more about QuickBooks, but happy to know more about Excel. Okay, so let's dive into Excel. And if we get far enough, quickly enough, then we'll add on and do a little bit about accounting and QuickBooks at the end. But I think we're going to need 3 hours to get where I would like to in terms of using Excel. So, okay, so let's dive into using Excel and or Google Sheets. And I'm not going to be able to tag everything that isn't replicable in Google Sheets because I'm not using Google Sheets as frequently as I used to. But I'll try to recall the major things that I know aren't there. I'll try to mention them as we go along. So I've got an Excel file here. And I encourage you, if you have Excel, open Excel document, and I want you to type anything that I'm typing. follow along as we go, and I will make a copy of this document, which you can open in Google Sheets. I will make it available in Google Drive at various stages through this presentation, so you can open it, or I will just save it at the end and make it available to all of you. So the first thing I want you to know about is when you make a form, so you have a sum, for example. So we have so we're going to have revenues here, and we're going to have expenses. And so under revenues, let's say we have earned revenues and we have public revenues, and we'll need some lines in between each of these, but for now, I'm just going to put them all together. And private revenues. Or we could just make it a little bit simpler. We could just say earned, public, and private. And under expenses, the most common one are usually artistic, production, programming. Then we would have maybe marketing first, and then fundraising, and then administration costs. Administration. There we go. All right. So say we have, for now, this is just our sums. We have $1,000 here. And this is going to be our project number 1. And we're going to have a second project. And let's say that's $10,000. And let's say this is 2,000, and this is 5,000. This is, I don't know, 7,500, and this is 2,000. Okay. The first thing when we create, like over here, let's create a total. And we create a formula. And there's many ways to do this. You can select each of these or select, yeah, let's use auto sum, but I'm going to use a formula actually. I'm just going to put sum, which hopefully you all know of. Sum is just addition. And we're going to sum up those 2 columns. But actually, I don't want to have the column in between, so I'm going to go equals sum, open bracket to start the formula, and we're going to select number 1 and comma and G. There is the second column, and I'm going to close it off with a bracket. And let me zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. So we have this formula here, sum. That's summing our 2 projects. And when I drag this down, so when I hover, I don't know how basic I need to go for everyone, but just, I'll try to quickly do it. You can drag formulas down rows and across columns. When you hover over it, when you first that's selecting it there, it's an open plus sign, but when I hover over it in the bottom right-hand corner, it turns into a closed plus sign. That means I can now drag it down and it'll replicate that formula. So it's adding the same 2 rows, or the same 2 columns, sorry, but on a different row. What happens when I drag this formula to the right? Notice that, so when I drag it down, the sum formula, the row associations move down 1 row. And when I drag it up a row, that row association goes 1 row above. But what if I want to have the exact same column associations 1 column over? If I drag it over, I lose those column associations because the column associations move 1 column. What if I don't want to have that happen? The first thing you need to know about is adding a $ into the formula for the column. So for the column association, column E, add a $ in front of the E and add a $ in front of the G. So now when I drag the formula over 1 column, those column associations do not move. So I retain the same sum. Cool, eh? What about if I drag down and I don't want the rows to move as well, Then you're going to want to add into the formula here. So I double click to enter and edit the formula. Add a $ in front of the row associations, which is the row 4. Now when I drag it over, well, when I drag it down, it's going to be the same. And when I drag it over, it's going to be the same. So this is a really important feature to know about when you're trying to build up a complex template and you want to duplicate a formula across multiple rows or multiple columns, and you want the row association or the column association to move, or you don't want it to move. You have to have that $ before the association for the column or the row, or both. So you can have just the column or just the row or both. It doesn't really matter. And whichever you do is going to result in something different. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to know about. Just as an aside, you can add text together as well as numbers. So say we have first name. So my name is Jessa Aguilo, and they're in 2 columns. So I can add those together using the ampersand sign. Is the simplest one. There's a function called concatenate that will do it as well. But we can go, this equals Jessa, so put in that column and row association, ampersand, and then between Jessa and Aguilo, I want to add a space. So we're going to use a double quotation mark, space, double quotation mark to close that space off. And then we're going to ampersand and add my last name. So now I put into one row, into one field, so we would call this like in a field in the database, first name, last name, and I would call this full name. So you can do sums essentially for numbers and text. And we're going to come back we're going to deal with numbers for now, but we're going to come back to text functions a little bit later. So I'm just going to leave that off to the side for now. In fact, let's just put it into a different tab. Let's put it there. And we can call this budget. And we can call this one people. Okay, so we're starting to build up our budget.
Can please show the formula again? We have in the chat request.
Can you show just the formula again? Yes. So for the people, it is just each of the column and the row, the associations with the ampersand to join them together. And I've used double quotation marks with a space to add the space. Because if we just did, so let's put full name, no space. If we go, this equals, and let's zoom in so you're all, actually before I do that, let's zoom in again so you can all see it better. If we did equals Jessa and Aguilo, it would put Jessa and Aguilo together with no space in between. So having this formula with ampersand, quotation mark, space, close quotation mark, that will force adding the character a space. We could add, I know I don't have a middle initial, but I could, add Jessa Awesome Aguilo, and there we go. It could be anything that you want in there. I'm just adding a space. All right, so building out a budget. So the first thing I wanted to note about budgeting is the traditional way to build a budget and my preferred way to build a budget. So the traditional way is you have, say, earned revenues here, and so go to home, and up here, insert a bunch of empty lines. The normal would be, so whatever our earned revenue accounts are. And you may notice that I'm kind of using different columns for indenting. Rather than using the indent text increase, or decrease, I'm actually putting each account in its own column, and there's a very good reason for that, and I'll tell you. I hope to tell you why a little bit late. I should be able to. I think there's time to tell you a little bit why later. So under earned revenue, you know, might have ticket sales. What else is there? Commissions, and one more might be royalties. There's others, but there's a couple. And then you might have, so the traditional way would be like have subtotal, or earned subtotal. And then you create a sum formula, and there is a nice little auto sum down here. So creating an auto sum, and I should have done it one more down. Oops. And I'm just going to drag the region here down one. So that's the traditional way of doing it. And then but you need to create a subtotal for all of your regions, for every part of your budget. I don't want you to do that anymore. I want you to stop. Never do that again. In the future, never, never, never. Because it's an unnecessary line. Let's get rid of it. And let's make these numbers here to be we did an awesome project of $10,000 of ticket sales. And let's make our sums on the actual line called earned. And we'll probably need to bold it so that it sticks out in some kind of way. And we'll just copy and paste that formula over. So I use keyboard shortcuts. Like again, I don't know how basic everyone needs to be, but Control-C, Command-C on Apple, Control-C on Windows, and Command-V or Control-V to copy and paste it across. And then let's just have some other numbers here so we can see that it's working, make something a little bit different, and drag this formula down. Not only is this going to help reduce it reduces the number of rows that you have to contend with. But there is also an awesome feature called auto outline. So let's just put in a few more rows here. Insert. So we're going to have federal, provincial, and municipal. And I should get rid of that because this is going to be a sum. And let's put some numbers in there. We can copy this sum across, and we can copy this one for here because it's going to be the same feature. And actually, we can copy all of this and paste it across because we don't have dollar signs. So everything's going to move down to the appropriate section. So we have the same sums there. All's working. So what auto outline does is, and actually the best, I'm just going to open up a template so you can see it in real life before we go and build it. And so this Excel file that I'm going to put on your screen in a second, as soon as I open it here, where did it go? It's opening still. 1 second. It's taking a long time to open. There we go. So I think the best example is, let's use this one here. So what we're eventually going to build is, like, we don't have time in 3 hours to build this. This took me months to build out, a couple weeks anyway, over time. But what auto outline does is it creates these little navigation trees based on your sums. Some downs, not some ups. Some ups don't work. Some downs do work. So you can, it will auto outline and discover and create these little navigation buttons that hide varying levels of tiers of your various levels of sums that are tiered. So, and I have to enable editing for this to work first. Okay, great. Enable content, because there's a macro that I built in there. It's safe, it's fine. I built it personally. So I can, so level 5, level 6 is all of your rows here. But if I go to 1, it hides everything and it leaves us only with total revenues and total expenses. Level 2 will get all of those sub-level accounts under each of the tiers. Level 3 will then get sub accounts under each of those second level tiers, and then their sub-level accounts under each of those, and then more. And those are all based on sum downs, the formulas that we've created for the sum downs. So if we go in, and you can do it manually, but you can also use auto outline. So if I select just these, and actually, so we can see it a little bit better, let's add a sum for our earned revenues. So our revenues is currently earned plus public plus private. And let's make that bold and copy it over. And so we have a little bit of distinction here. Let's add some formatting. I don't know, we can just use the defaults. Can make it pretty later. And then earned here, just so there's some distinctions. Let's use a light gray. And we can change these colors to orange. And then I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste special. If you've never used a paste special before, this is like a gold mine of stuff. And what we want to do, I've already got the formulas, but I want to paste the formatting. So I have the exact same formatting across. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to paste the formatting. And I'm just going to move these in a little bit. Okay, so now I'm gonna select this area, and maybe just let's put in some more here for private. So we have individual and corporate. And 1,000. Let's copy that. And let's just, what is this formula? There is no formula. So this equals sum. Copy that across. Okay, so now we have all of that. So let's select this, and we're going to go to data. And under outline, you can group, and you can group manually, or you can click on auto outline, and it'll create those tiers for you automatically. And so the auto outlining is looking for sum downs. And so your minimization is going to be at where your sum is. And then all the rows below it will be hidden. Kind of understand it there? And it didn't work here. I'm not quite sure why that didn't work. Oh, it didn't work, I think, because there's an empty row here. So it didn't look any further. So you can go in and you can ungroup basically and clear outlines at any time by selecting the area and clearing the outlines and going back. So as you build, you can keep using the auto outline and testing it and making sure that it's working. But you can also select an area here, and you need to know the quirks of what area you need to, if you're going to do it manually, you need to know the quirks of what area to select. And so if we just we select the sum here and all of the rows and click on group, it's not going to work because it's always going to choose the group one row above or one column to the right. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to select the 3 rows here and group them. And now we have the earned it's working properly, basically. So you could go in and do every single, if you have kind of a quirky, if auto outline isn't working, you can go in and do it manually. And it works not just for rows, but it works for columns as well. So let's try the columns here. And because I selected all of them, it hides all of them. So for this to work, if I'm doing it manually, I need to select 1 before the total and click on group. And now we have 2 there. So, and that's fine, but we could go in and select group here. And now we can just have the total or your various projects. What I used to do when I didn't know how to use Excel was I would have a budget for me internally that was lots and lots of detail, and then I would manhandle a file reference to another tab or to another Excel document itself with a simpler version of it. And so you're needing to constantly make different versions. And I no longer do that anymore. I have one Excel template, one Excel budget for my projected, my actual, and it will, through these groupings, which essentially is hiding and unhiding various levels of rows and or columns, you can generate and create a simplified or a more detailed report for your board or for your collaborators that hides stuff that you don't want them to see, but gets them a sense of the overall budget. So it reduces your load on needing to create and duplicate. Like what I used to do was I create, okay, another, budget simple, budget summary, say, and I would create a bunch of cell references here. So just earned, public, and private, and go, okay, this equals over there, and choose that, or choose that, and build it out that way. And that's, never do that. Never, 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 never. Use the groupings and auto outlines in Excel. The other thing that maybe you've not used before, although I hope you will have, is something called freeze panes. So that's under your view menu here in Excel, freeze panes. And there's a similar function in Google, is freezing your top row, freezing your first column, or choosing a cell reference, and it will freeze an intersection point that is a row above and a column to the left. So if I select right here, the project row and revenues over in here is going to be frozen. So freeze panes. And now when I scroll up and down, you have your project headers, and left and right, these for each of the column descriptions, they don't move. So when you're building out a big complex budget like this one with many columns, you want to have those cell references or those panes frozen. So things will move around in a way that you would like. You said it's impossible to make outlining work for the sum if is below the data. Yeah, so if you're summing up, the auto outline will not work for you. I just find it works so much better and looks so much cleaner, and you're getting rid of a row, an unnecessary row, by having sums down instead of sums up. And you can, I think you could try to manhandle it, doing it manually, but it's going to be very difficult for the outline to work if sums up. So it really just needs to be sums down. And for your projects, for your columns, you can't have your total first, so it can't be sums left. It needs to be sums to the right, with your total being your last column, or else the outlines are not going to work. It's just the nature of the business, and I've never been able to figure out a different way of doing it.
Could you also show how the freeze works in action?
How it works in action? Yeah. So you choose that. So if you want to, so let's go back to our budget here, and I'm going to go to freeze panes and unfreeze panes. So actually, I think the best way to show you is not here, because we don't have very much information, but let me show you in another template that we're going to come to a little bit later, which has tons and tons of information. So I'm going to move away from budgeting for a second, although I guess it would work. it'll work for this one. So this is my massive budget template that I'm trying to get you to learn the basics of how I built it, so you can go in and look at it in more detail and potentially build your own. This is in Google Drive. It's not complete. It's a work in progress, and you're not allowed to share it widely. You can use it for yourself, but you don't have my permission to share it widely with anyone else because it's a work in progress. It's not finished. So the freeze pane here, notice as I scroll up and down, all of these rows here are frozen. They're not moving. So the title for each row or each column that describes what's in that column is not moving. That's the first part of it. And then the freeze panes, so you can freeze columns, you can freeze only columns, or you can freeze only rows. And in this case, I've frozen both rows and columns at this intersection point right here, where everything below it here is scrolling, whereas this is not moving. And as I scroll to the right here, all the rows here that describe what each account, revenue expense account is, they are not moving, as is a total projected and actual for the year. Those aren't moving either. So it's just really helpful. And if I go to view and unfreeze panes, watch what happens. Okay, what's this column? What's column R? I don't know what's in there. And as I scroll to the right, I don't know what my rows are anymore. Everyone understand? Yes? So you want to freeze pane so you know what's in every row and you know what's in every column, your titles basically. So to turn freeze panes back on, you choose your intersection point. If you're freezing both columns and rows, your intersection point will freeze rows above the field you have selected and columns to the left of the field that you selected. So I want revenues not to move, and I want annual surplus not to move. So I want this intersection point to be frozen.
And could you can you show what section this function is? I think we have a participant.
It's under view. In Excel, it's under view. In Google, you can do this in Google. It's a little bit clunkier in Google. Do you want me to show you how to do it in Google? You can freeze like one column or one row at a time, 2 columns, 3 columns. You can't select an intersection point. You have to say, okay, freeze 3 rows or 5 rows or 6 rows, freeze 3 columns. You have to manually choose the number for each, but it's possible to get this kind of functionality in Google. Okay, so then the next thing I want to come back to, okay. So we've done sum, and we know about sum downs as opposed to sum ups. That simplifies things significantly. What if and do you notice, like, okay, so I had to like manually build out all of these sums for each one, and I don't know, and like here, if you remember me doing it, I copied and pasted the formatting, but not the formula, and so it looked like it was a sum of $2,000, but there wasn't actually any formula there. So you can break, when you're creating all of your sums manually for each region, when you have to do that manually, you'll make mistakes and your budgets will be incorrect. There was once a company, major deficit, like significant, like 30% of their annual income. They lost that year because the budget that I acquired, I discovered within 2 weeks, was broken, and the sums were not in the right areas. So they thought they had 30% more revenue than they actually did, and so they spent it, and they had a huge deficit of 30% of their total budget for that year, because they manually created all of these sums, and they were broken. And when you have a big budget across many projects and many accounts, many chart of accounts, revenues and expenses, it's a lot of sums to check. What if there was only one sum function that you had to check and it worked for every context? That is the next level up, and we're going to come to that a little bit later. But I want to teach you some other functions first. But it is possible to have one function to sum every single context in your budget. So let's teach you some basics on some other functions so that when I show you the function, you will understand it a little bit better. Okay, so we all know about sum. So we have 1,000, right? So equals sum and the range. I want to teach you about Boolean, true and false. And so the first function is if. And so before I get any further, let's zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. I keep having to do that. And we're going to go, what time is it? So we're 45 minutes in. So we're going to go for another 20 minutes, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. So I want to teach you if. So if is a contingency statement. If you do a test, and if it's true, you can tell it to do something. And if it's false, you can tell it to do something different. The other function, so we're going to learn if. The other function I want to teach you is called if-s. And it's just a bunch of if statements, one after another. So let's look at, so let's put those up in the top here. And let's call these functions to learn. So let's look at if first. So if we type equals if, you notice a little contingency here in Excel, so you can double click on it and it'll give you what the elements of the if statement are. It's also up here, like a preview of the function. You can also click on insert function here and we are working on if, and so you can see the various components that are required. I just type it out because I understand them well enough, but if you don't understand all the components, then click on the FX there in Excel, and that'll open up a nice contingency here. So the if statement requires a test of some kind, like is, so let's put something there. I don't know, we can just say, is this equal $100? And there's nothing in that field, so I'm going to have to put $100 in there for this to work. And if the value is true, let's put in the text in quotations, wow. And if it is not equal to 100, then let's put bummer. And it doesn't, and we get a result there of a bummer because there's no value, so it doesn't equal 100. But if I put in 1,000, it's not going to work. If I put in 50, it's going to stay as bummer. And if I put in 100, it will change to wow. So you can add text, you can do math, you can do other functions, all kinds of things in here. An example that's not about math would be first name. Actually, I'm just going to stick with that. Let's just stay there. So let's do a different test. If it's less than 100, actually greater than 100. No, yeah, greater than 100. So it can be math, it can be all kinds of things in there. Just as another example. What if we have, and I think for this example, I'm going to show you concatenation of first, middle, and last name. Maybe I'm jumping a little ahead, but I want to get into some of this before we run out of time. So in the Google Drive folder, there is an Excel document there called Excel Formulas Examples. So, and you can open that in Google Sheets. So you can go in and look at it. And so up at the top, I've got an example here of a first name and last name, and we want to concatenate those or join them together with first name and last name. And in this case, there's some spaces in first name and last name, so those spaces are there. But down here, I think it's in this example. Yeah. So down here we have first name, middle name, and last name. And we want to concatenate those three together and add spaces in between them. But this case is really complicated. It's not just true or false once, the test. Okay, we need to know, is there text is there a first name? So we do a true or false test for that. And if it's true, put in the first name in the like put in the actual name there. And if there is nothing, then leave it out. Don't put, so this is where the formula is, and we're trying to concatenate. If there's text here for first, middle, and last, we want to concatenate them. So if there is something there, then put it there. And if there isn't, then we need another test. And there's multiple, like we need to do like a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like there's 13 or 14 tests here for the various scenarios. So it's complicated. So you can, in this case, you can, so we do an if statement, equals 100, wow. And then this is if the value is false, we could embed here another if statement. And it gets really complicated really fast. So we could say if this is greater than, no, that's, yeah, greater than 1,000. Value is true, wowzers. And if false, put nothing. And so now when I put in like 100,000 here, it didn't quite work. But see, it starts like I know what I'm doing, but it didn't quite work. So it gets complicated when you need to do more than one test at a time. So there's another way, another formula, IFS, which will do a series of tests one after another, which will simplify things much better. So if
a little bit more, we have a request in chat.
We have a question in chat.
A request to zoom in.
I can zoom in more, sure. Is that better? So that if statement, I'm just going to go back to what it was, so you will have it. So I'm just going to change that to bummer, is what it was originally, just so you have it. And it was $100. Okay, so if S will do a series of logical tests, one after another, and you only need to tell what you want to put it if the value is true. And if it's false, it will go on to the next test. So we have if this is less than 100, put bummer. And then the next test, if this is greater than, no, that's less than one anyway, it doesn't matter. Greater than 1,000. Yeah, that's, no, that's, I always get my greater than less than signs. I have to think, okay, which is which? So that is less than, and that is greater than 1,000. Let's put in 1,000, then put wowzers, or just wow. And that's it. And sometimes you'll get an NA result, which means not available. So there's a contingency for that as well that we'll come to. So what am I doing wrong? This is less than, and this is greater than. So we get an NA because I have no values that are less than 100, and I have no values that are greater than 1,000. So we need to, there is a function called isNA, which is a true or false test. So I'm going to add it on the outside of this test, of this FS series. So in as a, do all of that value. And if it is NA, actually we have to do it as an if statement. I think actually a better, I'm going to come back to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll come back to that and how to deal with that. So we're just going to have the NA for now. So if S, we'll come back to how to deal with NAs a little bit later. Don't have time, I think, right now. So if S, so kind of get the basics of this, right? So there is a version of if and if S for sums. So there is a sum if, and there is a sum if S. So how might we use that? So let's go to our budget. We could do, let's create an account number. So let's say revenues are 4,000 and earned revenues, I think these are actually CADIC numbers if I remember correctly. 4,100 is earned and 4,110 is ticket sales, 4,120, 4,130, oops. 4,130, and then we can make this, I don't know, 4,300 and 4,500, whatever it is. We can do a sum. This equals sum if, and we need a range, a criteria, and a sum range. And I think I might make a mistake the first time, so bear with me. But the sum, so the sum range is basically what we want to do is sum if every occasion where there's a certain value that's the same. And so for this to actually work properly, we want, so this is our account number and we want a parent. So earned revenue is a parent of the account number 4,000. Ticket sales is, its parent is earned revenue and its account number is 4,100. Or we could do a cell reference here and add a $sign before each so we can drag it down. Then public, its parent is revenues. And we can add a $sign for each and copy it down. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use sum if and find, basically what we want to do is, we know that this is revenues, but to sum revenues, to find, instead of manually doing it, what we want to do is search for every occasion in parent where we have 4,000, which are these 3 rows, and we want to sum what is here. Okay, so the function is going to be sum if, the range is the account number. See if I do this right. The range is the account number. The, no, it's going to be the parent. The criteria is going to be the number we're looking for. So we're looking for 4,000 throughout every occasion here in parent. And then the sum range is going to be the whole row there. And we get the same number, $20,000. So I'm not sure if you're quite understanding what's going on there, but if we take this and copy it to something else, which has, so let's add 4,300 down here, or we can use a cell reference, the $sign. Its parent here, oops. Yes, I know, it should be a $sign, not a %sign. And drag it down. If we copy this now, it's going to be looking for every occasion of 4,300 in parent, and wherever it finds 4,300, which is these 3 rows right here, it's going to sum the values that is there in the associated column that I've chosen. So I can take this same formula now, and if I move it over a column, what I want is, I don't want this to move. So we need a cell reference here. This should be column A. And if we had a $sign before the A, when I move it next time, oh, and we need the parent not to move as well. So there needs to be $signs on the B, oops, before the two B's. Now when I copy and move that, oops. We're getting the sums, and if I change these to, I don't know, $50,000, you'll see that everything is working properly. So now you can build an entire budget, revenues and expenses, using that single formula once across your whole, anytime you need a sum, just put in that formula. So it does require you to put time in creating an account and a parent. That's the tricky part. But once you've done that, it means you only have one formula, and as long as that formula is correct, it's going to work across your entire spreadsheet, your entire budget. It's been a literal lifesaver for me in building new budgets and I've been using it for about 3 or 4 years, and I've been doing budgeting for like 15, and I only figured it out about 4 years ago. So it's not new to me anymore, but I wish we would be more open and more and make sure more people know about this, because it would save so much freaking time in an awesome, positive way. So if you didn't get what I just showed you, go search it. SUMIF, you can do SUMIF in Google Sheets, you can do it in Excel. Go search that function and get some more training. But this is the principle that I want you to build your budgets on in the future, is sum down, so you can use auto outlines. Freeze the top panes and columns so you can move your budgets around, and then use SUMIF as one formula that's going to work across your entire worksheet, so that you don't have broken sums that are hidden and that you lose 30% of your budget that year because you have a broken sum somewhere. The biggest problem I find around doing it manually is when you have for example, this is where it gets broken all the time, for me anyway. And when I do it manually, you have your like area 1 and area 2 and area 3, and you do your sum manually, right? And say you have your second area, so I don't know, other, and let's put that down below. And we have now the same range, so I can actually copy that formula. But what if I insert a row? I want area, this should be area 3, it doesn't really matter, but you get the idea. I want to have area 4. And this is, I think, what happened with the company that I worked with. They inserted, area 4, and they thought that sum was still capturing the area 4 because they just inserted the line, but that doesn't work that way. When you insert a line below a sum, it's not going to insert. It's not going to be included in your sum. So you have to, anytime you make those additions, you have to manually drag it down. Whereas if you insert it here, your sum is going to include that. So if you don't like the SUMIFs and you don't want to go the way I'm suggesting, what I want you to do, if you're going to just continue to build manually, is always have an empty row at the bottom of every group. So always have that empty row there, include your sums all the way down to the bottom, and never use that row, and insert a row here, so area whatever 7, and keep that empty row so that your sums are going to be extended every time and they won't break. Okay? If you need to go manual, or like you have all these budgets and you don't want to go until you have a new template, you don't want to change anything, then just make sure you go in and insert those empty rows below. Make sure all your sums go to include those empty rows, and then just leave those empty rows and don't use them, so that every time you insert, you'll be good and your sums won't break, okay? That's the other way around it. So a lot of people, you might, like that's maybe where your subtotal is currently. So you could get rid of your subtotal move it to sums down, and then you're off to the races to moving and transitioning to a better template. All right, what should we do next? Okay, I want to show you how I'm using SUMIF, just so you can get a sense of it. So we've done this in a single spreadsheet, but there's so many applications for SUMIF, and I just want to give you some examples of, in practice, how you might want to use this. So for that, I'm going to pull up the detailed operating budget template that's in Google for you. So we have this, it's a massive template. All the values are zeroed out. So there's no numbers in here to look at. But what we've got is some exports. So these are my chart of accounts from ArtsPond. I have exports from Excel for all the figures. I couldn't quite figure out when I built this at the time. There must be a way, but I haven't been able to figure out how to get the chart of account numbers into its own column. So I had to create some formulas here using if and something called is blank. So it's testing, is this field blank? And if so, don't put anything. And if it's not blank, like this one here, is not blank, then do something. I needed to separate out the chart of accounts into their own column, and I couldn't figure out how to do that in Excel. But I'm then using SUMIF, because I used to do this manually. Actually, I used to do this manually. Like 10 years ago, I would receive an invoice, and I would manually type it into my Excel budget. And then I would manually process it in QuickBooks, and then I would export from QuickBooks. So I was manually typing it in, it's called double entry, every transaction. What a waste of time. So what I want to do is pay an invoice in your accounting system, whether it's QuickBooks or Waves or whatever, export a report. And as long as you have an account number or an account name, you don't need to use numbers. So we could use here earned revenue instead, just use the names. And then the parent account for subscriber, membership and admissions would not be like 100 or 102, it would be admissions and ticket sales or earned revenue. So you don't need to use account numbers. Account names will work just as well. But I want to get the whatever numbers are in here, I want to get them into my budget templates, but I don't want to manually enter it. I want it to happen automatically. So SUMIF is going to do that. So I go to my multi-year template over here. Short doesn't have it, but detail does. 16, 17 actual. I want to pull the sums or the actual account numbers for each of my chart of accounts into this column. And I do so, I can use the SUMIF function to do that. In this case, I'm using something called Vlookup instead, and I'm going to teach you Vlookup, don't worry. But I could, in this context, if I wanted to, I could use the SUMIF to pull that data into this field, and I would just go, and I've hidden the parent account. For this case, I'm only showing the name account. But I could, using that same sum, I could do what I want, what I just showed you as an example. So no manual entry. So that's just one example. And I think I'm going to leave it at that for now in terms of budgeting. Is there anything else I want to show you about budgeting? I think that's it for now. I want to now take a sidestep away from just number entry and looking at insight and learnings, both financial and non-financial. Looking at textual data and looking at financial data. So the first thing I want to teach you about is pivot tables. And then, and so we're going to do pivot tables for numbers. And then I want to teach you mail merges. And how to, I think there's time. I think I have time. There's so much I want to teach you. Like I have like probably 50 hours of training that I want to teach you all today. And we just can't do it all, so I have to make a choice. But I want to teach you about pivot tables and pivot charts, pivot tables and pivot charts. And I would like to teach you about mail merges. And I think that's probably all we're going to have time for before our next break. And there's one function, my favorite top all function, although SUMIF has kind of become also really important to me, but another function I want to teach you is Vlookup, which has been a lifesaver for me for 20 years. It's really made possible the work the kind of the complexity of the work that I do at ArtsPond with just Excel, and because we don't have a database, so I use Excel as a database. So I want to teach you Vlookup, and I want to teach you filters. And I want to teach you, yeah, I think that's all we're gonna have time for today. So let's look at pivot tables first. And to do that, I'm going to just show you an example, and then we're going to build one all by ourselves. So pivot tables are to help you summarize large amounts of data or even small amounts of data into a graph, into a chart ideally. But it is flexible and adaptable. You can change its formatting. You can filter it out in different ways for different purposes. So, so I'm going to show you some non-financial data, but it's all numbers based as an example. And this comes for all of my, for ArtsPond, all of our analytics from our website and social media. So I have an Excel spreadsheet. I can't share this with you, unfortunately, but you can see it. I will try to make an example with no data in it, and you can put in your own data, but we have a dashboard here with various, from my board and so on, total social website, social media, news media impressions, unique visitors, visits, pages, hits, total bandwidth, resource downloads, documents and audio, and various charts to graph all that out. And so this is coming from a bunch of tabs here. And I don't know any other way to do it than having a bunch of tabs, but I just right-clicked and added a tab color here to help them stand out a little bit. And so I have the raw data, and I've numbered them here so they're in some kind of sensical order. I put the raw data here. So what this is the raw data here in dark orange, and the light gray here is a calculation. So this is all the visits to our websites, each of our domains. And we have unique number of visitors, total number of visits, pages, hits, bandwidth, and gigabytes bandwidth. But this is what we get. I don't have time to teach you this formula, but the formula to deal with this is in the Excel formula spreadsheet, so you can go look at it. The raw download that comes from our website provides the bandwidth as a text, 240.63 megabytes, or KB for kilobytes, or GB for gigabytes. And I need those to be, I can't sum that, I need that to transfer that into a number. So there is a formula here that I've created to change that into a number, into gigabytes basically, so I can add them. But this is what I download from the website, and it's a lot of information. It's years, it's like 5 years of information every month. And then some we have, so this is monthly visits, we have daily visits, we have weekly and hourly visits, so it's a lot of data to deal with. And I just want to know what the total amounts are and what the trends are. And so pivot tables is what this is for. This is what these are built exclusively for. So I have my raw data, and then you'll notice a bunch of, so 10, 15, 20, these with a P on the end, these are where all the pivot tables are stored. And so this is giving me a summary by year here of the sum of the total unique visitors, some of the total visits, some of the pages, some of the hits, and some of the gigabytes. And then on the dashboard are where the charts are coming from that. So let me show you quickly the basics of creating a pivot table chart. And let's see if I can successfully duplicate this one here from the data. So the first thing you need to do is go to data, and you want to create a pivot table. Actually, I think it's not, I think it's on insert. Is that where it is? Yeah, insert pivot chart. But hang on, that's not, I want data pivot table. See, even I forget where they put things. Pivot table. Where did they put it? Haven't done it in a while. Pretty sure it should be here. Well, let's just, okay, yeah, let's just try pivot chart and pivot table. There we go. So that's under data, and then charts and pivot table pivot chart. So what, and actually there it is right there. That's what I was looking for. Cancel. There it is. I just forgot. So forever and ever and on YouTube, I'm going to embarrass myself. I forgot where it was. So under insert pivot table, and then you can do pivot table plus a chart at the same time. But for now, I'm just going to show you pivot table. So pivot table brings up the same dialog box. So you need to choose the data. So I'm going to click on it here, and I'm going to go to the month here, and I'm going to select basically the entire worksheet for the data. And it's going to go in a existing worksheet where I had currently selected. Oh, okay, I know why it's not. So I can't actually do that. I can't select the whole worksheet because I have a name here at the top that isn't associated with any of the columns. So I actually have to manually select just the column names. And then I'm going to, we should probably do keyboard shortcuts. Control Shift or Command Shift down arrow will get me to the last row. And then I'm going to hit double arrow again twice, and that'll go to the bottom of the spreadsheet. So Control Shift down arrow twice will take you to the bottom. And now it brings up because if it just doesn't like that extra row at the top, which is the title of the spreadsheet. It doesn't like that. If that wasn't there in this data selection, I would have been fine. So now I have to do it manually. And then we get our pivot table fields. So what I want is, first in the row here, I want to have in rows is the fiscal year. And then I want to have sum in values over here, the total number of unique visitors. And you just click and drag, and number of visits, number of pages, hits, and bandwidth. And that's really the basics of it. Now I've got some formatting to do because it doesn't look exactly the same as what we have up there. And we've got some blank things here. So you can just manually select everything here and do formatting. Or you can, under here, look at the value field settings, and you can show them as, and look at the various formatting here through the number format. So number format, accounting, none. And I only selected that one column, so I need to do that for each one. And that's what I just do it manually by selecting all of it. So accounting, or just number actually is better. And we want no decimal points. And I want to have a comma separator because it's actually not money, so I shouldn't have used accounting. Okay. And then this one has no decimal points, or 1. And there you go. Then you can select the whole thing, and under data, create your pivot or insert your pivot table chart, and choose your format. And I'm not going to bother. The problem with this is with pivot table charts, if you actually want to print this, all of the labels and filters here are showing up, but you can go into the settings and remove them or make them non-printing. So you just have to go in and look at your pivot table options, and you can remove them. But the pivot table chart itself comes up with all these labels here, formatted in a way that I don't like them. So I don't actually use pivot table charts that often, unless I know I want it to be filterable and updatable. What I do for my dashboard is I select everything here, Control C, and use our handy dandy paste special as a reference, paste as a link. And then I have a nice little chart, and then that's visuals, that's not formatted like a pivot table. I can make it format however I like, and then I make a chart based on that. So it's a little bit of extra work on my side. You don't need to do that. You can use pivot tables and pivot table charts only if you prefer. But I'm a little bit picky on how I like things to be formatted. So you can paste as a reference for that data, and then you're off to the races. The thing about pivot tables is once you've created a pivot table, do not put anything below it. If you know there's going to be many more years or many more rows to be added in the future, or do not put anything to the right of it if you know there's more columns that will come out in future results. So you'll notice because I have, hopefully this is going to work for like 20 plus years, that will survive that long, knock on wood, will still be around in 20 years, that I need lots of rows for each fiscal year. So I've put all of my pivot tables to the right. And when I think there might be an extra row or two column added, I leave some space for them. In these cases, I'm not expecting any to be added in the future, because as soon as you have new data, if there's a pivot table chart bumped up against it, or there's other content bumped up against it, the pivot table will not complete. It'll say, oh, there's content, we can't replace that content. So you want to leave extra rows or extra columns wherever is appropriate. So that's why I always put pivot tables in its own tab. So hopefully that's a quick and dirty introduction to pivot tables. I can't go into any more detail than that because I don't have time. But they do not, if you've never looked at them, they are your friend. They're a little bit tricky to get all of the full results out of it, but they are super powerful, and it's worth a bit of time to invest. The one thing that I could show you that's in addition to this is the filter field. Where would there be a good example for that? We could, for example, add on this one. Actually, that's not going to be a good one to do that. On this chart, we could add a filter, say, by property. So up at the top here, I now have all in that chart, in that tab, there's a bunch of websites. There they all are. I could hide the blank ones, and I could change the results here to be just the ArtsPond website. So now I see all of the results only for ArtsPond and not all of the other domains. So filters is really cool as well. But I want to have all for us. Okay. All right, mail merges. Let's look at mail merges. I have a database of 24,000 contacts. And we only have about less than 1,000 subscribers on our MailChimp. And so I want to be able to write those 24,000 people once or twice a year with updates, and give them the option to, as a non-subscriber, I don't want to break CASL, Canadian Anti-Spam legislation. I want to follow those guidelines, but as a not-for-profit, maybe we're permitted to offer a small number of updates of general interest to the community, as long as there's an option for them to say, please don't email me again. in the future. So basically to unsubscribe. They're not part of a monthly newsletter, but I'm using Outlook, I'm using Excel, and we're using Word, Microsoft Word. So the three of them together to send out communications to our lists. So if you've never done this, let's see if I can teach you how to do it in 10 minutes or less. So this is possible to do through Google, but it's going to be a slightly different process, and I don't have time to teach you. But it is possible to do this through the Google process with Google Docs, Google Mail, and Google Sheets. And so the process will look a little bit different, but it's kind of that similar process. So the first thing we need, so I'm going to close this. First thing we need is a list of people that we're going to email. So I'm going to create a new document, and we're going to, actually we could use the one I have right now because I have a people tab here. And so let's just add an email. And maybe we could add a company column as well. And so this is ArtsPond. And forever and ever and ever, if this is on YouTube, we're going to have my email address. And we can do another one, which is hello@ArtsPond. Just as a test, and we shouldn't have any blank rows here. And so we can make this one blank. All right, so I need to save this now. And I'm just going to save it on my desktop. So we're going to just call this Digital Tools 3. Okay, so we've got our contact list. And it's going to be, it can have thousands and thousands more, but this is just one example. And now we need to have in Word, we're going to have a beautiful email. I'm not going to spend any time making a beautiful email, but we could pretend. We can include, you can make it however you want to make it look like, with lots of images and charts and graphs and whatever. But the most important thing to do is we're going to go under references and mail merge, wherever that is. It's not a reference, sorry, it's under mailings, and start a mail merge, email messages. So we're going to go dir, and we're going to replace this with the data from Excel, but we're just going to template it out right now. Dir first name, and we want to pull Jessa from the Excel document, dir. So lovely to have your support this year in the amount of, and so let's add a donation. And we could add a date field and a whole bunch of other things. And let's just, so we can see what it looks like, let's insert some pictures. One second. And we need to make that smaller. Where's size? Why won't it let me fix the size here? So I'll just do it manually, I guess. Clearly I'm missing something. So let's put that right up at the top. So it's like a little newsletter, and we can have lots more content, but there's the example. So let's save this on my desktop. And we're going to call it Digital Tools 3, Digital Tools 3 mail. And so under mailings, we need to follow through the various elements. We started the mail merge, and then the next element is select the recipient. So we could type in manually a list, but we're going to use an existing list. And that's on my desktop. And it is this, Digital Tools 3. And we're going to choose people. And I don't remember. I'm going to have to take a look. There should be, pretty sure, yeah, there is a header for each one. So I did it properly. So yep, first row contains headers. Then we can edit that recipient list and add various sorting and filtering, find duplicates and remove them, can validate various addresses, but we don't need to do that right now. We don't have time, but we could, let's hide and not send to that one. Then we could add, if we had an address block that was set up, we could go in and choose that, but we just have first name and last name. So I'm just going to manually insert merge fields here of first name, and we want it to be right here. Dear first name, insert merge field. So lovely, have your support in the amount of donation. Okay. And we're going to have one recipient, so I should probably make a bigger list, but you can then preview the results. So let's zoom in a little bit so you can see it a bit better. I should have done that right off the start, sorry. But so first name has been replaced with Jessa, and the donation amount is there. And you can scroll backwards and forwards through the results. If you wanted to print these, you can finish, merge, and edit individual documents. You could print those documents. So this is how I create tax receipts. For someone that doesn't have an actual database, we have an Excel document with all their names and their donations. And then we have a template, create a template in Word as a Word document, not as an email, as an actual email. The template out for the tax receipt, and then just merge in the appropriate fields in the appropriate locations. But in this case, we're going to actually send an email. We're not going to print it. And the subject line is going to be whatever, thank you. And we want to send it in HTML format, but we could send it as an attachment. So it would be likely as an HTML attachment, but it might be generated as a PDF. I never send attachments. I either send it as plain text or as HTML. You could choose the current record or from like 1 to 30 and then 31 to 75. But we'll just leave it as all. And you need to have Outlook open for this to work. So nothing I think will have happened, but it'll get sent off. And so I can see if I can see it, show it to you here. Yeah, if I try it now, because I didn't have Outlook open, so I'll try it again. And just see if I can see it come in. And here it is. It took a second. And there it is. And it pretty much looks exactly like what I saw in Word. There is no, notice there is no left border or anything, like some padding. There's no space. So you might want to play with that and test it and see how it looks. The one quirk to know about for mail merges for Outlook is what data file is set as default in your settings. And that is the email address it's going to be sent from. So if you, like me, have multiple accounts, you want to go into your account settings in Outlook and choose not the email address, but the data file for the email address that you want to go to, and set it as the default, and that's the email address it's going to be sent from. So if I show you that file accounts here, 1 second. So if we go to File and Account Settings, and not email, but data files, and then choose the appropriate email address that you want it to be sent from and set it as default. So I could change it to be ArtsPond, hello at ArtsPond, and it'll be sent from that email address. Okay. It doesn't matter what email is set as your default. It won't be sent from that one. It's your data file. And you can always change your data file default back if you have a different email address. You can always change it back and forth. It doesn't really matter. So that is it. All right, shall we come back? What I would like to do next is look at not financial functions, but some text and some search functions. So some text functions are left, right, and mid. And another contingency one that I would like to, kind of a test one that I want to share with you is blank and is NA that you're going to run up against once in a while. I think that would be helpful for a number of situations. And my favorite function historically is Vlookup, which is vertical lookup, and there is an HLOOKUP as well, a horizontal lookup. So I'd actually like to just start with Vlookup, and I'll work our way backwards through this list here, and look at some textual analysis to help you with your contact databases in Excel and processing things. So what the heck is Vlookup? So let's add a new tab, and let's just call it data for now, so it's something different. And so we're going to have some raw data here. So let's say we have projects, and what we want is let's say let's call it an ID and project name and project description. My camera is, oh yeah, sorry, my camera is turned off. Yep, I can turn my video on. Thanks, Victoria. So you can see me. And of course, I need to zoom in so you can see what we're doing here. So we have project name, because we have a people tab. So actually, I think I'll just rename this as projects. So we have a people tab, we have a budget tab, and now we need a projects tab. And we want an ID number. So project 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I'm just going to create some things like awesome 1, and then if I drag it down, it'll enumerate. So we have our various projects, and we could come up with long, amazing descriptions, but I'm just going to call this description 1 and drag it down. Okay, and let's just get rid of this. All right. So what, and then we're on a, say we want to pull, we're in another, let's actually in budget. We want to, is that what I want to do? No, that's not what I want to do. Let's see, what is a good situation? What do we want to do here? Let's create just another tab for now. And we have, currently we have our data here in columns. What if we want to change and search in a variable contingency from rows to from columns, awesome description 1 in column B and C, to rows in this other tab. So we have, say, so we're going to put, this is going to be project name and project description, and what we want to do is search by ID number. So we know what the ID number is, but we can do the project name. It doesn't really matter, just as this example. So we're going to do Vlookup, And we can use the handy dandy here. So there's a lookup value that you're looking for. In our case, we're looking for 2. And we know the ID number is 2, but we don't know the name of the project, and we don't have the description. It's sitting on that other tab. So we want to look it up. We want to find it. So there's the lookup value that we're looking for. That's that. And ideally, the data you're looking for and searching for on the other tab is both in column A. The table array is the entire tab or the entire spreadsheet that you're going to search that data for. So we're going to be going to the data tab currently, and it's going to be the entire worksheet. So we just click in that little upper left-hand corner half triangle here to select the entire worksheet. And we're going to add a $sign before each of the cell references. So when we drag it around and move it, it will stay as this whole worksheet and it won't be moved. So I'm going to add a $sign before the row 1 and a $sign before the 1 million, which is the maximum number of rows allowed in Excel. And then the column index number is the column the column number, not the column name. So not A, B, C, or D. It's the column number that you're going to be searching for that information. So we want the project name, which is column 2, I think. Column B, if I can go check in a second. And then the range lookup is an exact match or an approximate match. I never use an approximate match here. So find an exact match it's always going to be false. The approximate match doesn't give you results that really work. So it's going to give you stuff that you won't like. So I would never put true there. And now we know that ID2 is awesome too for project name. Now, can you imagine a spreadsheet of contacts and you know their name, but you want their email address. So you could do a Vlookup, find their name, and then pull whatever row their email address is in. Or if you have an email address for someone, and this is more common, you have the email address for someone, but you don't know who they are, or when they last made a donation, and how much they gave. You can use the Vlookup to search your contact database with emails being in column A, that first column, emails being in, and then all your data about that contact is in your various columns. And you just pull the appropriate column number. 2, 3, 5, 37, 64, whatever it is. And it'll pull out that data based on the comparison. So as an example, if I change this to Jessa at ArtsPond as the email lead for that project, and I change this to Jessa at ArtsPond, the same results happen. It doesn't break, because now we're searching for an email address instead of an ID number. Okay, so Vlookup is my favorite thing when I have complex information that I'm trying to pull from one spreadsheet to another. I use email address as the common across everything, and then I can just pull whatever I need whenever I need it. Okay, so Vlookups, big savior. And just as an example, I worked for an organization, and they had a large number of products that they sold, about 600 products. And they met every year, the price changed for those products. And so they had a bunch of, every sale they made was a spreadsheet of those sales. And they had the name, a lookup on their names, but they didn't have a lookup on the price. So that every time they made a sale, they were manually typing in the new price. Whereas if they did a Vlookup on the name of the product or the account number for that product or whatever, and they looked that up, then they only needed to change the price once in one location in their pricing spreadsheet. And anytime that you called upon that product, the current price would be called up. And this VLOOKUP is variable. It is not like putting a cell reference, like doing equals A and then going and manually finding it on a tab. VLOOKUP is going to be a variable to any situation that it's looking for, as long as that one comparison data that you're looking for exists on both spreadsheets. If it doesn't exist, so if Jessa doesn't exist here on the other spreadsheet, you're going, oh, and I don't need to email myself. If it doesn't exist on the other spreadsheet, so I'm going to change this back to an ID number, and I'm going to just remove the hyperlink there. Then I'm going to get an NA result. An NA result means not available. Similar, if I drag this down and I put in something, if I put in 2, it'll, okay, I have a result for that one. So we need a formula now to deal with NAs, because maybe you don't mind the NAs, but if you don't want NAs to display, we need to test for if the result is NA, don't put anything. So we're going to do if, which we've already learned about, and we're going to do this whole VLOOKUP thing, all of it, as a search for if is NA, is blank. And if it's blank, or if it's, if it's NA, so not is blank, if it's NA, if the result is NA, we don't, so I just close it off, we want to put nothing. So we put 2 quotations with no spaces, no content, which means nothing, another comma, and then we paste in that same VLOOKUP that I copied and close it off with another bracket. And now that NA disappears. And so I only get results when there are results, and when there isn't a result, then we don't show anything. Or we could put in anything here that we want, is like please add, if it's not available. Okay. So that's quickly about is NA. Is blank, it's very similar to is NA. It means if there is no data. So let's put if is blank, and the value I want to test is there, then put no data. And if it isn't blank, then put that data in there. And now as soon as I type a 3, we get the results. But if it's blank, it just says no data. But we could just put nothing. Okay. And then as soon as I put data, that data shows. So those are some examples of VLOOKUP. HLOOKUP does the same thing as VLOOKUP, but instead of looking across rows for data, it looks across columns. Let's look at some text functions, left, right, and mid. Mid is a little bit more complicated, but left and right are pretty simple. Let's look at those first and where we might want to use them. So left, let's take the text here. We want actually, what left does, let's put it over here. And let's put first calculated first name. So we're going to take the full name, and what we want to do is we want to go from the beginning, J, left until there is a space. So we want to pull out the first name. We know that my name here is 5 characters, so we want to go left 5 characters. So we can manually do it. So left is choose the text and then how many characters you want to go. So we want that, and we're going to go 5 characters. And that'll pull my name out of the full name, just my first name. And then we can do last calc. And then right does the same thing, but it goes from the end, right, a specified number of characters. And my last name is the same number of characters as my first name. So we can pull out, often you'll have a database, and sometimes it's broken out into first and last name. Sometimes you only have full name. So sometimes you want to concatenate first and last into full name, or sometimes you need to pull full name into first and last name. You often also have like an address, city, comma, province, space, postal code, and you want to break out city, province, and postal code into your columns. This is one of the ways to do it, is using first, last. Mid, then, you specify how many characters in from the left you want to start, and for how many characters you want to go, and it can go all the way to the end or not all the way to the end. So it's somewhere in the middle. And it's more complicated to understand how to actually get what you need. But mid function is the other one to look at. But what we want in a variable context, so let's do, I don't know, happy days. And if I pull that down, actually I want to pull something that is longer than 5 characters. Because I hard-coded it at 5, it's not going to work when I have something that's different. Happiest, I don't know, happiest daughter. Huh. And when I drag it down here, we're only going to get 5 characters. So we want to build out, left is the starting point, but we don't want to hard code the number of characters. We want the number of characters to vary based on another situation, on its situation. So the next function I want to teach you is len. And len will count the number of characters in a field. So I want to go over here. So let's break it out first. So we have here, what do we want to do? We want to be able to pull out Jessa only and Aguila only and happiest only and daughter only, right? What is the commonality in these two situations? What distinguishes the two words? It's the space, right? In both situations, there is a space separating out between the two. So we want to be able to go left up until where there is a space to get the first name. And then there's a different process for getting the last name out. So the first thing we need to know, we want to know is how many characters are there in that field? There are 11 total. And then we need to know how many spaces, how many characters in is the space. The space is the 6th character. So we need a formula that will be, in this case, 11 minus 6, right? To get the first 5 characters, Jessa. And then happiest, I don't know what the math is there, but the space is further along. So the math we need to do is len the whole thing minus another function that I want to teach you is find. So find is find text within a specific text. And you can specify a start number optionally if you like. So what we want to find is the space. So we've learned about quotations, so double quotations within and comma within the text here. Find the space. And that tells us, okay, we know the number of characters is 11, and we're going to minus the location of the space, which in this case is 6. So we get 5. And then in this case, it's 8. So now we are going to go left that number of characters. What happens if there are often when you're doing data entry, some types their name and then they actually add a space. We don't see the space here, but when we concatenate it together here, notice we added a space to a space that's already there. We can't see it, but it's there in the text. So another function I want to teach you very quickly is trim. And what that does is gets rid of any preceding and trailing spaces in content. Now that extra space, I can type as many spaces and it'll get trimmed out in the result. Okay, so we've learned now, we'll add those. So we've learned find and trim. And if I now drag this formula down here, I have happiest pulled out. So there's your first calc auto. Now we need to figure out how to do last name.
And we do have a question. Will this work for postal codes?
Yes. Yes, it's a very good question. So in the template, in fact, so maybe we'll just do an aside, and maybe I'll leave as homework. See if we can figure out how to use this approach to get right. And what would you do in a case where you have a middle name some of the time, but not all the time? And the answer is in the Excel formulas examples that you can download. So here's the first and last, and basically the same formulas with trim and left are there that I just showed you how to do. And then I've given you the answer for mid, and all these variations are there. But see how far you get on your own before you go in and look at in detail. Then what about province? So like you'll have a survey, right? And you want to have as few questions in the survey as possible. Like you want to know where they live, what province they are in, and you want to know their postal code. You do not need to ask both their province and their postal code because you can get their province from the postal code using an Excel function. And building up this idea of the left and so on in terms of its formula. So let's zoom in here and see if we can see it in detail. And is NA is in there in the formula itself. So I think what I'm just going to do is I'm going to copy this formula out and paste it not as a formula, but as text. Yeah, I meant to wrap text. And let's zoom in. So, oops, I went way too far. Where did it go? There we go. Doesn't want to work for me here. I think I'm just going to make the font bigger. Okay, and now I can zoom out. So this formula is just a bunch of if-else series statements using left. So we are given, in the example, I should go back. In the example, we are given a postal code, and I never ask for all 6 digits. I only ask for what's called the forward sortation, the first 3 digits of the postal code. You can ask for all 6 if you want, but it's too much data for me to process. And from there, you can pull out what province they are in. Using left, you look at, you want the province is pulled from the first digit of your postal code. So you use left to pull out the first digit. So I'm using left in the field, pull the first digit, and in an if-s series. If the first character is A, it's Newfoundland. If the first character is B, it's Nova Scotia. If the first character is C, it's Prince Edward Island, and through all of the variations for each province. Okay. So yeah, you can absolutely use left with if SS, with is NA, because if there is no postal code, you want a final option. Like if it's blank, if there's nothing there, you want an option to have that data processed with a blank or something like that. And so really you can go in and look at more detail. Any questions about that? I've got someone who has to leave. Where can I find examples in Google Drive? So yeah, Victoria just pasted out again the link. So this Excel template there is available for you, and you're free to share it with anyone that you like. The budget template that's there is not for share. That's just for you to look at and for attendees of this workshop, but it's not for share. But this one I do not mind you sharing at all to take a look at. Okay, something else I want to show you is drop-down lists. So let's look at that. So drop-down here is you want to enter in data, and you want to have like a value list for that data for data entry. So I use this, for example, when I'm trying to code out my contact list by discipline. So I know the contact is in visual arts or performing arts or disability arts or whatever, media arts. And I want new staff to choose from a restricted list of categories. I don't want them to add visual arts with a lowercase v as a new value. I want them always to be capital V. So you want to create a value list. And this is actually really easy to do. But if you've never done it before, then this might be an aha moment for you. So basically you want your data to exist, your value list to exist somewhere. In this case, I put it right beside it, but I'd like to propose the idea of creating a global values tab or a data tab. You'll see that in the budget template that I've shared with all of you, or that you have access to. If I pull that up again, and way off to the right, I just have a tab called data. And this is where there's various details that I'm going to be referencing all of the time. And I only want to change them throughout the whole worksheet. So I have various project names, for example, and their ID and their codes, payroll rates for CPP and EI contributions, all this stuff, various tax deductions and tax rebate rates, as I call them, like global values, or just global data that you want to share everywhere and you only want to change it once. So these are like value lists that you want to have people potentially to pull from. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to assign in a drop-down list all of your projects? So here's your data, and wherever you want to put the value list is fine, but I'm just going to put it over here. So you're going to go to, where is it again? It is under data validation. So you select the data. I think it's, well, let's actually check where we need to do. So data validation, allow any value. We want to value a list. And the source of that list is right here. Okay. Nice. And then you can just move that and copy that anywhere you like. Really easy. There's other data validation that you can do. Not just lists, but you can check against numbers and times and dates and so on. So you can check your data, and if you enter a date, so I often do this, for example, when you're inputting data for donations for a specific fiscal year, you set the start date and the end date for that fiscal year, and anything that's outside of that is not permitted. So we can put a start date here. Actually, I'm not going to show it. I don't have time to show you right now, but explore data validation in terms of something that you want to do, in terms of helping you with your data entry. Something that I absolutely love is remove duplicates if you've never used it before. It happens when you're downloading lots of junk data, for example, where there's empty rows. So let's see if we can just create it. Oh, put it in the Digital Tools 3, not this one. Let's put it in this one. Say you have some data, so we have first and last name. Oops. And I don't know, we have Mary Jane, and we have John Smith. And imagine you have thousands and thousands of rows, and you want to copy that, and you have all these blank rows you want to get rid of. Rather than doing each one separately, you can copy that, and we're going to paste it over here, and we're going to go to Data, and remove those duplicates, and we're going to choose based on F and G. Oh, it's because I didn't have, if I have 2 blank rows, and Jessa, yeah, if I have 2 Jessas. So now good. So I have that, and remove duplicates. Then it will always leave 1 blank row, but it got rid of the 2 Jessas. So this is when you have like a lot of data, and there's duplicates for every data. So when for example, I have a contact list, 24,000 contacts, but there's some duplicates there. And there's sometimes the same contact or actually different contacts at the same organization. So there's 3 staff at one organization, and they all share the same email address. So the email address is in there 3 times. And when I want to do a mail merge, I don't want 3 emails going to that same email address. So I export out the full list that I think I want to send to, and then I remove the duplicates, so I have only 1 version of 1 email address. It's really, really helpful. And when I have lots of data, like if you export your list of contacts from Facebook, and you try to import them into Excel, you're going to have, for example, like Jessa Aguilo, and then down here you'll have your next contact, just how it works. You're going to have lots of empty rows. So you want to get rid of all of those duplicates, then you can just do it like this. And it'll get rid of all of them except 1. So you just move it up, and you have all of everything one next to each other. Sorry, I'm getting tired, so I can't speak my words. The next thing that this is really basic, I hope, for all of you, but if you haven't run across it, the next thing that I haven't shown you is filters. Does anyone not use filters, or everyone familiar with filters? This is a lifesaver for, in a number of contingencies. You can use filters for money, for sure, but I find it best for contact databases. When you have lots of contacts, and I can't pull up my example, but so we could, let's use this one. And let's pull a bunch of these. As an example, oops, I should have done 3. So So all you need to do filters is select where you want the filter to go. So I often will insert a blank row, so I'm not covering up the headers, and turn on filters here on the data tab. You can then use filters to use text filters or finance number calculations, math, in terms of your results. So text filters, equals, does not equal, begins with, ends with, contains, does not contain, or a custom filter. So you could filter out and show just the results here manually of just the awesome ones and just the awesome threes. So it's basically so you don't have to manually hide specific rows. That filter I find really helpful. And you can do it across multiples, have more than one. And it's hard sometimes to know, okay, where is your filter? That's why I like to put them separately in its own, so that these icons can be a little bit bigger. So you can see where they are. And if you select the entire row and just click on clear, it'll remove all your filtering. If this is money, I would not use a filter in this way at all for this, how I'm going to be using it, but just as an example. So data filter. We could take all of this, number filters is greater than 500 and is less than, and it'll filter out your results according to that math. How many of you currently export data from your social media accounts? Like how many, if you have a page, do you export your data and keep track month to month, all of your data from your various social media accounts? Get some yeses. How many people would like to do that in the future so you can keep track of all of your impressions? So I think this would be a helpful, just so you can understand how you can use Excel in multiple ways. Let me quickly show you that. This one is over there. And I'm on ArtsPond's page. So this is a page as opposed to a group. Group is a similar process, and we're going to go to Insights. And we're going to export our data. And I'm going to choose, actually, if I was doing this tomorrow, then, because I'm up to date, I've gone until September. So if I waited one day, this would be actually fine. But I'm just going to choose from October 1st to October 31st, and I'll just be missing some data. And we're going to export the page data. It's kind of a manual process. You've got to do page data, you've got to do post data. And so I'm just going to save it. I have an analytics folder, so I encourage you to create one. So APO admin and then operations, just so you can see the back end, how I organize things. I try to be very organized. And maybe I can show you how I organize our financials as well in today's workshop. So I have an analytics folder, and by year, and anything older than a year goes into my backup. I don't, this is SharePoint, I don't have, so I have like 6 years of, but you won't see them here. And I go into the year, and then so I have codes for every project. So APO, FB, and I never remember if it's page or post first, but it's page. We did page. So this is APO, ArtsPond Facebook page, 2020-10. For October. And then we're going to do the same thing for post. And I did have a video that I did in October, so I'll do video as well, but not in this video. And I can just choose this one, post, rename it. And so there, if you've never realized you could do this, there is a minefield or a gold mine of so much data. This is why Facebook is worth billions and billions of dollars, because they know everything about us. And if you've never looked at this data, my goodness, it is overwhelming. And you're going to get a notification that because it's not an Excel file, it's XML data, but it opens up just fine in Excel. So just say yes, and it'll open up in Excel. And there are tabs and tabs and tabs of data. Like, look at them. There's like not hundreds of tabs, but there's so many. And this is every month of every year. Like, look at that, I'm still going. Still going, tabs and tabs and tabs and tabs and tabs. I haven't counted them, but I think there's about 80 of them, roughly, if I'm guessing. But I think there's not quite 100, but there's a lot. And in our analytics, I'm just pulling out the absolute basics. From the key metrics tab, I haven't had time to go in and look at all of them, but they tell you the total number of likes per day. So we started at 771 likes and at the end of the month, so we got 10 new likes that month. And there's just tons of, each spreadsheet then has, each tab has tons of data also. So there's thousands of metric points for your page itself, and then for every post there's data. And so my spreadsheet for analytics is just pulling some of this selected data. So that's the wrong one. So let's pull it. Where did it go? I think I closed it. Yes, I did. So let me open it up for you. And you don't have access to this. I'm not comfortable sharing it right now, but you can see it on the screen. So way over here, I have a social media tab for groups and for pages. So you see all the monthly, and I've gone all the way back to 2015. Tracking data. So I'm just inputting and downloading, and I put up at the top here. So on Facebook, I'm pulling from pages, just column H from the key metrics. So I can remember, because I always forget, what column, where am I pulling data from? So I have it at the top so I remember. And then the post itself, from the post, I have several. I, L, and T, and O. Oh, and page, I have T there, my tired brain. So H and T. And for post downloads, I have I, L, and O. And then I have some math that's summing it all up. And Twitter, there's profile visits and mentions that don't exist on Facebook. And then there's total posts and tweets. So that works for Instagram. It works for LinkedIn. It works for all of the platforms. So I don't specify. And then total impressions is the page impressions and post impressions together. Then you can have your total engagements. That's your likes and forwards and so on, and calculations between new followers and people that like you versus following you. Have some math that's doing all of that. And so I just pull the data from this Facebook thing. So we're going to be looking at key metrics here for page, and I want data for column H for the ArtsPond Facebook group for the month of October 2020. And I've kind of estimated based on an average. So there's a function we haven't learned yet. Average of previous months, so I can estimate what my impressions are for the year. I put them in red, so I know that they're not the actual numbers. And then when I put the actual numbers in, I turn them black. So we're gonna go to, in this spreadsheet here, we're gonna go to column H. And this is the total daily reach on the page. So I'm gonna select all of it. And right down here, it gives me a sum of 1471, and that's the number I type into my spreadsheet right here as in H, 1471, but I won't do it. Okay, and that's the process for a page. Facebook groups, there's an analytics side as well, and you just download those, and you'll have to decide for yourself which ones you want to take. If you want to pull down and note these these ones and see if you like them for yourself, feel free. So posts is I, L, and O in key metrics, and pages is H and T, but you might have your own that you want to look at. Twitter is the same process. You can go to Twitter. And under more, there's analytics. And you want to look for the month that you are provided. You got to take note that all the social media platforms do 28 days as their default. So you always see at the top 28 days because that is for every month, there is at least 28 days. And it's so they just kind of work off of a 28-day thing that's constantly rotating for 4 weeks, right? What's the math? How many weeks is that? Yeah, 4 weeks as one option for data. And then, so you have to take a look and make sure that the report that you're doing and that you're looking at is the month that you want and not a 28 days. So Twitter also, so they provide 28-day summary that's constantly rolling. So that's your half month to 4 weeks later, but they also provide a monthly summary here. And so I just manually type in these numbers. Wouldn't it be nice to have a social media platform that pulled this data, a solution that pulls this data from you and for you and automatically inputs it into your database? There are solutions that do that, and we'll be working on one eventually down the line with our Hatch open source software platform. That's something we want to be able to provide in the future, but I'm doing it all manually right now. Okay, so that's a little bit about using Excel for your tracking your data, and that's where all of the pivot tables are essential to figure out your year totals and your various platforms and creating nice little pretty charts. How many of you do not work? What I see someone saying that's scary. I missed that. I wonder what that was about. What was that? What was scary? Probably all the Facebook data was scary, right? Yeah, it is scary how much they know about us, and that's what they're selling to, and why they're so profitable, because they know so much about us. But here's a simple way for us to try to pull and learn from the data that's being captured by and about us. And I encourage you all to go in and look more detailed at that data and figure out if there's things there that are more appropriate to you than what I pulled, because I literally spent half an hour looking at the data and, okay, I'll just pull out the basics. And that's it. How many of you do not work on a calendar year, but you work on a fiscal year? That, you might have a March 31st year end, or a June 30th year end, or July 31st year end, as opposed to January to December. Do we have people working on a different calendar year? Okay, I need to teach you a worker. I figure probably most of you would be on a June or July. If you're in the performing arts, June or July is very common. March is not that uncommon, but June or July seems to be the most common. To use pivot tables and to generate fiscal year reports, there's a workaround that you need to know about, because the pivot tables, when you start using the filters by year or by fiscal year, defaults to what Excel thinks is the fiscal year, and it's a bit tricky to change it. And that fiscal year is calendar year. And so if you're wanting to look at fiscal quarters, Q1, 2, 3, and 4, I do, that are customized to your own specific fiscal calendar, you need to do some formulas to make that happen. So I've shown you that formula in the Excel formulas examples. I've built it down here. And I've also shown you some other formulas to pull out date information. So you have a date, a specific date. It could be just the month and the year, it could be just the year, or it could be day, month, and year. I haven't given you examples yet on dealing with time, like the hour and minutes. But so you have a date, and we want to be able to pull out of that date, what day of the week is it, Monday through Sunday? What month is it? What fiscal quarter might it be, 1, 2, 3, or 4? And what fiscal year it might be based on whatever your fiscal year end is. The formula I've given is based on July 31st as the fiscal year. A future edition of this will have a customizable format and all you'll need to do is in the data tab, specify what your fiscal year end is, and it'll auto-calculate. I haven't had time to build that formula yet, so I'm going to have to teach you quickly the guts of it and how to customize it to your own situation. So an example of how to pull out the day of the week is just select the date, use text, and then the format of the day of the week is DDD. D stands for day as 3 letters. If you wanted it to be the number, you would put DD. If you wanted it to be the month as like OCT, you would put MMM. If you wanted it to be the digit for the month, you would put MM. Just using text, pull out the date there. So here's the example for the month. It's just MMM in quotations, just using text. There are other ways to pull it out, but that's my favorite. Fiscal year is, and to add QTR before it for quarter, is a little bit more complicated. We need to use the month function with choose. So we pull so month there, right here, it's choosing the month. So so month will pull what month it is. What 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll pull a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. So instead of using text, because we need it to be a numerical value, not a text value. Month is the way to pull out the month from a date. Then we need to use choose. And choose allows you, once you give what the number is, the subsequent numbers are assigning a value based on whatever you give. So if the month, so we have choose the month, if the month is 1, so January, the number we're going to add to QTR is 2. Which is the first number after month there. If it is February, in my case, that is the beginning of fiscal quarter 3. Then February, March, and April. Then the next 4 is May. That's the beginning of the 4th quarter. So 4 is May, June, and July. That's quarter 4. Then the next, see how it works? 1 is August, September, and October, and 2 is November and December. So if your fiscal year end is June 30th, you need to change each of those by 1. So it would be 2, let's see if we get this correctly. It would be 2, we would go backwards. So this is, so June, July, August, and September are 1. July, August, and September. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So this is 1, 1, 1, and then 2, 2, 2, and then 3, 3, 3, and 4, 4, 4. So this is now for June 30th. So let's test that. Let's change this date to be 30th of June 2019. And we know that that is the fiscal quarter 4. That's correct. And the fiscal year is going to be 2018-2019. And when I choose fiscal year, I always use the end of it as opposed to the beginning of it to assign the fiscal year. And that's how most accountants, when they just choose a year in your financial statements, they will just put the year that the year end is in, not the year that the year started in. So if we now choose 1st of July 2019, oh, sorry, June 30th, 1st of July 2020. Oh, it's right, because I only changed it here. So I have to change the formula all the way down. I only changed it here. There we go, that's better. Okay, that's the basic principle. So I'm just gonna revert it back to the way it was, to July 31st, and you can take a look at it. So that'll pull out the fiscal quarter. And then the fiscal year itself is a bit more of a, it's choosing the year. See if we can look at this. And choosing the year, and just trust me on the math. I don't entirely understand why it works. Well, I do, and I don't. But if we add the year and a month together, and it's less than or equal to, and this is why the fiscal year didn't change, because I need to change the fiscal, this number here. What is the beginning of, what month is the beginning of the fiscal year? So if I had changed this to be 7 for July 31st instead of 8 for August, then the fiscal year would have correctly shown. So if we can trust me on this, we can go back to, actually that's correct. Now we go to 1st of July 2020. That shows as fiscal year 2021. Because our fiscal year end now is June 30th. It's all working properly. So 30th of June 2019 should belong to 2019 fiscal year, and like 1st of March 2018 should belong to the 2018 fiscal year in the 3rd quarter. So it's all working properly. So if you want to, in order to create a pivot table in Excel that's using fiscal quarters and your fiscal year end, you need to have this in your data. So let's look at our analytics in my example here. You'll notice in all, oops, sorry about that. In all of the data, I always have fiscal year and fiscal quarter included in the raw data for every entry, whether it's monthly, whether it is daily. I have fiscal year and fiscal quarter pulled out, and it's the exact same formula there that you just saw. It's the exact same one, pulling out that data, and now we can create, using fiscal year, using that calculation in your pivot tables, your fiscal year, not what Excel thinks. Because if you can create a pivot table and just choose fiscal year as one of the filters from Excel, but it's not going to work in the way you want it to, because it's going to be calendar year, not your fiscal year. So hopefully that helped a little bit. We've got 15 minutes left before we're supposed to end. I think I'm happy to keep talking and share more, but I'd like to open it up to anyone that has a specific scenario or a question about Excel. So we've not done any bookkeeping, but is there anything about Excel or a situation that you would like to use Excel, and see if I can help you with it before we wind up. Otherwise, I'll keep teaching you stuff that I think will be useful. Is there anything, a situation that you would like to know how to use Excel to support you? Either in chat or some other means, putting your hand up. Well, the quick tracking of attendees in Excel or a spreadsheet, the best way. What I want you to do, yeah, so probably the best way, long-term, if you have a ton of attendees and a ton of projects and a ton of events, is to get a CRM, constituency relationship management system. We have a ton of events, 24,000 contacts, but I can't afford a CRM right now. And the free ones, the open source ones, like Civi CRM, and as a not-for-profit, we got free access to HubSpot. They're okay, but they're not great for our specific needs in terms of the kinds of data that we want to track. So we are using Excel, and it is cumbersome for sure. I can't show you my contact event spreadsheet because there's private information there from our clients and our customers. But what I want you to do if you're going to, so yes, if you can't afford a CRM or don't know how to use a CRM, then yes, you can. And I encourage you to look at using Excel, at least in the short term to the midterm, and make the best of it. How I want you to use Excel, however, is not to create a separate tab for every event where you have to duplicate the same contact information across and have changing data. They have to keep updating across multiple tabs. I want you to use the exact same process that you kind of see with me and all of these analytics. I want you to have a data tab. And instead of like a property, you'll have an event. And instead of a locale, you will have an attendee. And you will pull those that data from Eventbrite or from MailChimp or wherever you're selling your events, and have just a data tab, and have your event, your attendee, the date of the event. And then what you want to do is then pull out non-duplicated versions of all of your attendees and get them into a contact spreadsheet. And you can use that handy dandy remove duplicates that I showed you earlier. So pretend this is all events here. Pretend this is all events data. You could, with attendees here, and there's lots of duplicates, just copy all those duplicates, and you want at least their email address and their name and whatever information you've got, and get them into a brand new spreadsheet so that there is only one copy of those contacts in one spreadsheet. So I call it contacts and events, or contacts and attendees. And so in your contacts tab, you're going to have all of your people. And what I want you to do is at the beginning, put the email address. And then I want you to have an ID number. And you can just, I often just call it a sort ID. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And then you're going to have your email addresses. And I probably should have just copied those. And it's the email. Oh, I hate that. If this happens to you all the time in Excel, I encourage you to remove all those hyperlinks. Oops. remove all those hyperlinks so that when you keep trying to select the data, you're not opening up an Outlook window or your default email address. You want to remove those hyperlinks. So it's just raw data. So we'll do that over here too, remove hyperlinks. I want you to have email address at the beginning, and then you're going to have your, let's create a new folder. Oh, oops, I did not mean to do that. Sorry, I'm getting tired, so I'm getting awkward here. Want to have your events. And so you're going to have probably like your event name and date and first name, last name, etc. But I want you to have their email address here and probably a sort, this is first name, and your sort ID here. There's a really good reason for sort ID. And let me just come to, oops, 1, 2, 3. And you have a bunch of email addresses here, and you have your event names here and dates, and you'll likely have multiple contacts of the same person. So we have event 1. And then you'll have event 2. And so this is where we're going to have, okay, Jessa Gilo came, and we know that my email address was this. Let's remove that hyperlink. And then in event 2, I also attended. So you're going to have multiple copies in your data tab. And if you get tons more information like addresses and all that stuff, I wouldn't put it in your events listing. Really, all you need in your events listing is your email address of who attended the event. And then what I want you to do is in your contacts, make sure you have email addresses first, okay? And then in your events tab, you're going to do a lookup. And so it's going to be that Vlookup that I shared with you. So Vlookup, and here, let me zoom in so you can see a bit more. I think I have enough time to, we have 10 minutes left. So I think I have enough time to answer this question. I don't think I have time to answer the payments question. But so Vlookup, we want to find this email address in the People's tab. And so we're going to add a $sign before the 1 and before the 1 million for the number of rows. And what we want to do is pull the contact. I'm pointing at it on my screen. I want to pull analog. I need to show you here. We want to pull the sort ID number. So that's column number 2. And the range is false, as we talked about last time. And so we're going to get a bunch of NAs for all these other ones. So that means so we have an event, we have a new attendee. So we have Mary Jane. And there's an email address. So Mary at, let's put just Mary at ArtsPond. And we have an NA. That means we need to add this contact to our contact list. And we could add a nice little thing so we don't have to see NAs if we like. So if is NA, and we're going to copy all of this. Put please add. Otherwise, find it again. Oh, I made a mistake. Oh, I know I missed it right there. There we go. So now we can have, and sorry I had to gloss over that, but it's possible to, contingency, have a kinder, please add. There is a way, if it's blank, we need to do a series test. Instead of just straight is NA, we need to do a test. If it's blank, then don't put anything. And if it's NA, then put please add. So instead of if S, instead of if, we need to change that to if as, and then do a test for blank. and so on, but I don't have time right now to do that. But I will add it to this file before I upload it to Google Drive, so you'll have it. And then we can just copy it down here, all the way down. And we know that, okay, we have an ID. We don't need to add this person. We don't need their contact information. We've got it in the contacts tab. Or we know we can go in and update it there. And so as soon as I add, in my People's tab, as soon as I add Mary at ArtsPond, it shows up with that information. So Vlookup is really key to pull information from different areas or find if there is information there, so you know if you need to add it or not. So this is, so you can have a data tab. All of your events is located in one tab, and then you can actually build a pivot table to count how many attendees attended this event, how many attendees attended that event, how many registered but didn't show up. So you could have registered, and we could say like register, you can have a code, or you could have two. So R is registered, and then A is attended, or you could have registered and attended in two different columns. So like you could have yes and yes and no, and they can build out a pivot table inquiry to figure out how many people actually attended versus registered, and build pretty graphs, pretty graphics or pivot tables based on that. So stop distributing all of your data across multiple tabs. Put it all into one tab, and as you have thousands of events, it'll get a bit cumbersome over time. But you can archive stuff and do it by fiscal year if you like, but really try this way in the future. I think it'll save you a lot of time. You will need to become an expert at pivot tables. So go and watch more training on pivot tables to make the best of it in terms of getting those visualizations and learning from your data. In the future, I'm going to be doing some more. I've got like 20 hours of training on Excel Advanced that I'm working on, a tool that I'll be able to release. I don't know when. It's taking a long time, but there'll be more training that I'll be going into lots of detail around this in the future. But if you have Excel, just go to Microsoft, and there's tons of online training starting from scratch with lots of examples on how to use Excel for each of these, and they'll walk you through step by step for each of the pivot table examples. I've only just shown you the basics.